The myths mocked in. The vast halls of the Galactic Council, laughter echoed like thunder. Alien delegates from 100 worlds gathered in their shining seats, their voices mixing into a storm of mockery. At the center, standing small but proud, was a lone human envoy named Daniel. He carried no weapons, no armies, only words. Yet those words struck nerves that aliens did not care to admit. Daniel spoke of the ancient legends. He told them of the lost human fleet, ships built in the early days when humanity had first stretched beyond Earth. These ships had vanished in the dark centuries ago, swallowed by endless space, but the stories never died, passed down from one generation to another. They became human myths, tales of a fleet hidden in the void, waiting for a time when it would rise again. The aliens laughed. They laughed so hard their voices rattled through the chamber. To them, humans were a small species, newcomers to the galactic stage. What could humans possibly hide from the great empires? To the alien leaders, the idea of a lost fleet was nothing more than a bedtime story. Legends for children, sneered a scaled diplomat from the Drakkar Dominion. Ghost tales from a weak world, superstitions, hissed a delegate with silver skin. Your kind needs stories because you have no history worth remembering. Daniel stood silently. His eyes held no anger, only a strange calm. He did not argue with them, he did not shout back. Instead, he leaned closer to the council's microphone and said in a steady voice, "Myths are not born from nothing. Every legend carries a seed of truth. Mock us today. But remember my words when the dark speaks back." The chamber roared with laughter again. They called him a fool. They called humanity desperate, and when Daniel left, the corridors whispered behind him. The aliens believed they had nothing to fear, but far away beyond the borders of any known empire, the dark of space stirred for centuries. The void had hidden secrets. Silent ships floated in eternal formation, their hulls blackened by age, their lights long dead. To the galaxy they were forgotten. To humanity they were legend. But in truth they were never gone. Among the outer colonies, humans themselves argued. Many did not believe in the fleet either. They thought it was a fairy tale their ancestors had invented to feel important. Parents told the stories to children at night, of ships waiting in the black, of warriors who would return, but even humans grew tired of waiting. Myths grew old, and in time only dreamers kept them alive. Still, whispers never faded. Traders told tales of strange signals from the far rim. Miners swore they saw ghost lights moving between the stars, and once, a patrol ship caught a faint transmission, an old human code. Forgotten by history, they thought it was an error. They erased it from their logs. They never spoke of it again. Back in the council chambers, alien scholars began to collect these stories not as warnings but as jokes. They wrote books mocking the lost fleet, presenting it as proof of human foolishness. On alien broadcasts, comedians made fun of humans. They acted out plays of humans waiting for ghost ships that would never come. The galaxy laughed. They all laughed. But space does not laugh, space remembers. In the cold and endless dark, something ancient stirred. A silent awakening. A quiet hum of engines long thought dead. Systems flickered alive, sensors turned outward, as if 1,000 sleeping eyes opened at once. A small research outpost on the edge of the Veyron sector was the first to notice. Their instruments caught a strange reading, massive shapes moving together in the void. At first, the scientists assumed it was a natural event, perhaps drifting asteroids, but the movement was too precise, too controlled. One young scientist leaned closer to the screen. Her face paled. "Those are ships," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "And they are not alien." Her report never reached the main channels. The outpost fell silent 2 days later. No signals, no life, only silence, yet rumors spread faster than fire. Traders swore entire stations were going dark. Pilots whispered of shadows following their ships. One merchant spoke of a colossal vessel gliding silently past his cargo freighter. Its hull bore markings no one could understand except humans. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council, the laughter continued. Aliens dismissed the rumors as human tricks. They believed humans were desperate for attention, desperate to make their myths real. But Daniel, the human envoy, did not laugh. He stood by the great windows of Earth's embassy, staring into the stars. His words from the council echoed back to him. Every legend carries a seed of truth, far out in the dark. That seed was beginning to grow. The galaxy thought human myths were dead. But myths, like shadows, only need darkness to return. And the darkness was coming. The forgotten signal on a quiet human research station orbiting the barren moon of Kesra. Alarms broke the silence. Screens flickered with strange data. Long streams of numbers that looked meaningless to most eyes. But to the few engineers on duty, the symbols were not random. They were codes, old human codes that had not been used for hundreds of years. The lead engineer, a tired man named Harris, leaned closer. His hands shook as he compared the signal against the archives. When the match appeared, his heart froze. The code belonged to the first generation of Earth's war fleets. The very fleets that legends claimed had vanished in the dark, the crew whispered among themselves. Some were excited, some were afraid. They had heard the stories as children, but none thought they would ever see proof. Harris ordered the signal recorded and encrypted. He knew if aliens discovered it, they would mock humanity again. They would twist the finding into another joke. But to Harris, this was not a joke, this was a warning across the galaxy. Humans who worked in the colonies began to notice the same strange patterns. A mining station on the edge of the Orion Belt received echoes of the signal. A patrol craft in the Nabora region reported ghost transmissions. Always faint, always brief, but always the same code. Like whispers from the deep yet. When these reports reached the Galactic Council, the aliens laughed again. They dismissed it as human error. Some claimed the codes were fabricated to make old stories sound real. Others said humans were too desperate to be respected. So they invented mysteries, still in quiet corners of human space. Belief began to grow, old veterans, gray-haired and forgotten, spoke with trembling voices. They remembered the early fleets. They remembered stories passed down by their own commanders. If the fleet ever comes back, one old soldier said, it will not return for peace, it will return for judgment. Meanwhile, alien empires pushed their ships further into human borders, mocking and pressing their strength. To them, humans were weak. They saw the legends as nothing but a shield for human pride. But strange things began to happen. Fleets sent to patrol near the rim never came back. Stations reported shadows larger than cities moving across their scanners. And then, silence. One such fleet belonged to the proud Veyron Empire. They had long mocked humans, calling them storytellers of dust. They sent 20 ships to patrol the dark where the signals were reported. Only one ship returned. Its hull was torn open, its crew pale and broken. They refused to speak of what they had seen, but fragments of their logs told the story. The recording showed massive shapes gliding out of the void, ships darker than space itself, moving in perfect silence. Their weapons were not like anything seen before. They tore through Veyron cruisers as if they were paper. The last words captured on the logs before the signal ended were chilling. They are not myths, they are real. Back on Earth, Daniel, the envoy who once warned the Council, read the reports. He felt no joy, no triumph, only a deep unease. The legends he had spoken of were no longer whispers. They were becoming reality. The lost fleet was awakening. Still, many aliens clung to denial. These are human tricks, they claimed. Fake transmissions, false recordings. But their voices trembled when they spoke, for deep inside, they knew the truth was clawing its way out of the dark. In the colonies, fear mixed with hope. Some humans believed the fleet would return as protectors, to shield them from alien oppression. Others feared the opposite, that the fleet had changed in the dark, that it was no longer bound by the will of Earth, but by something far more ruthless. The signals grew stronger, each one closer than the last. And then one day the signals changed. They were no longer random bursts of old codes. They formed a message, a clear and simple phrase, written in ancient human military script. We are returning. When the message spread, the galaxy trembled. Some refused to believe. Some prepared for war, but all of them felt the same chill. The myths they had mocked were no longer silent. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, engines roared to life after centuries of sleep. The lost fleet was coming back. First glimpses in the dark. The first true sighting came from an alien patrol in the Forgotten Rim sectors. It was a routine mission, simple and dull. A squadron of 6 light cruisers moved through the dark void, their scanners sweeping for pirates or smugglers. For weeks they had heard rumors of shadows, but no one believed them, not until that night. Lieutenant Corin of the Yerath Patrol sat bored at his station, tapping his claws against the console. Ghost fleets, human legends. Nonsense, he muttered. His crewmates laughed. The ship was calm, the stars quiet. Then the alarm screamed on the main screen. Shapes appeared. At first they looked like drifting asteroids, massive, silent. But when the light of a nearby star touched them, the truth became clear. They were ships, colossal warships, moving with perfect formation. Their hulls were black as the void, absorbing every ray of light. No signals, no lights, only silence. The captain of the Yerath cruiser ordered a hail. "Identify yourselves," the signal boomed across the dark. There was no reply. The shapes kept moving, slow but unstoppable. The crew grew restless, their laughter gone. Corin stared at the scanners, his voice cracked. "These designs, they match the human records," he whispered. The bridge fell silent, the captain's face hardened. "Impossible," he said. But before anyone could answer, one of the massive ships turned. Its shadow fell across the Yerath squadron like a predator blocking out the sun. Weapons powered up, but no energy signature was detected. The ship did not fire lasers or plasma. Instead, strange bursts of kinetic force erupted from its sides, metal projectiles traveling faster than light. They ripped through 2 Yerath cruisers in seconds. The ships exploded, their screams echoing into silence. The squadron panicked. Their weapons had no effect. Their shields melted under impacts they had no defense against. The captain of the lead cruiser screamed for retreat. Engines roared, but the shadows followed. Silent, merciless. The last transmission from the squadron was recorded. The voice of Lieutenant Corin, desperate and broken. "They are not myths, they are here. They are real." Then static silence forever. When the news reached the Galactic Council, shock spread like fire. The Yerath Empire tried to hide the truth, but fragments of the recording leaked across the galaxy. People watched grainy footage of colossal dark shapes ripping through cruisers with terrifying ease. Some still claimed it was faked, but most felt the cold touch of fear. For humans, the whispers grew louder. The myths they had told for generations were no longer stories. They were warnings. Old veterans wept, whispering prayers for what was to come. Young children asked if the fleet was coming to save them or destroy them. No one had an answer. Meanwhile, more sightings came. Traders swore they saw massive shadows passing by, their lights flickering as if swallowed by the void. Mining colonies reported ghost signals and then silence. A convoy of alien warships vanished near the Arcan Nebula, leaving behind nothing but drifting wreckage on Earth. Daniel stood before a small group of human leaders, his voice steady but grim. "The fleet is awake," he said. "The galaxy laughed at us, now they will learn." His words carried no pride. Only heavy truth across the galaxy, alien leaders argued. Some demanded war against the humans, blaming them for unleashing the shadows. Others demanded peace, hoping the myths would pass them by. But none could ignore the growing terror. In the depths of space, the lost fleet continued its march, ship after ship emerging from the dark, their movements precise, like soldiers obeying a silent command. No broadcasts, no explanations. Only the cold hum of engines older than memory. A lone merchant freighter caught sight of one of the colossal ships. Its crew watched in silence as the warship passed by, its surface scarred from centuries yet alive. A single symbol was painted across its hull, faded but still clear. The emblem of old Earth's military. The crew did not speak. They did not breathe. When the ship vanished back into the void, they sent one desperate message to every frequency they could reach. 4 words that spread like wildfire across the galaxy. "The fleet has returned." And with those words, the galaxy began to tremble. The galaxy trembles. Panic spread across the stars like wildfire. The Yerath patrol's destruction could no longer be hidden. Too many had seen the wreckage. Too many had heard the last desperate words. They are real. The Galactic Council met in emergency. Their halls once filled with mocking laughter, now shaken by fear. Delegates shouted over one another. Some demanded to strike at the humans, blaming them for waking the fleet. Others cried for alliances, hoping that together their empires could stand against what was coming. The sound of fear was louder than the sound of reason. The Veyron Empire, proud and arrogant, announced they would crush the shadows. They sent 50 warships to the rim, armed with the strongest weapons known to the galaxy. The council held its breath, waiting for news. What they received instead was silence. Then, days later, fragments of broken ships drifted into nearby systems, twisted metal still glowing from battle. No survivors. The galaxy trembled. For centuries, the myths had been a joke. Now they were a nightmare. The lost fleet moved without broadcasting a word. Without asking for terms, they did not demand surrender. They did not even acknowledge the living. They simply advanced. And wherever they passed, silence followed. In markets across alien worlds, fear replaced laughter. Traders whispered of black ships moving in perfect formation. Colonists locked themselves inside domes, praying the shadows would pass them by. Armies trained harder, but whispers spread among soldiers too. No matter the weapons, nothing seemed enough on Earth. Daniel stood before a gathering of human officials. His face was grim. "The Council no longer laughs," he said. "They finally fear what we always knew. The myths were never myths. The fleet is awake." Some humans cheered at these words, seeing it as a moment of pride. But Daniel did not smile. He understood the truth. A power that sleeps for centuries does not wake gently. Meanwhile, alien scientists tried to study the recordings of the fleet. They discovered strange technologies, weapons that did not match any known science, rail cannons that hurled metal faster than light, armor that bent starlight, shielding that made the ships look like pieces of the void itself. One scientist whispered, "These ships should not exist. They are ghosts-made metal." Entire colonies disappeared. Not destroyed, simply gone. Messages stopped, life signs ended. Outposts that mocked the fleet weeks earlier now begged for help. But no help came, no one dared approach the dark. The council finally broke its silence. Their leaders gathered and sent out a call, a demand to speak with the humans. For the first time in history, they admitted their fear. In the great chamber, their voices shook. "Tell us," one alien leader asked Daniel. "Do you command these ships? Do you control them?" Daniel looked at them and gave the only answer he could. "No," he said. "No one commands the lost fleet. It does not serve, it does not answer. It returns on its own will." His words turned the chamber to ice. Rumors spread faster than truth. Some claimed the fleet had turned against the galaxy to avenge humanity. Others claimed it was no longer human at all, but something older. Something darker that had taken the ships for itself. Whatever the truth, fear grew in border systems. Ordinary people began to flee. Ships filled with refugees crowded the lanes. Families abandoned their homes, carrying nothing but hope to escape. Yet the fleet was not chasing them. It moved with cold precision, choosing its own path, as if following a map no one else could see. A lone Veyron cruiser managed to transmit a partial recording before its destruction. The image was burned into every screen across the galaxy. A colossal warship, its hull scarred but unbroken, drifting from the dark across its side. Letters in ancient human script glowed faintly. The translation shook even the bravest leaders. Earth's wrath. The galaxy trembled not only because the fleet had returned, but because its purpose remained unknown. Would it strike all who mocked humanity, or had it come for something greater, something buried even deeper in legend? Daniel stood alone that night staring into the stars. He whispered words only for himself. Every legend has a seed of truth, and now the seed has become a storm. The galaxy had mocked human myths. Now those myths were writing their own truth in fire and silence, and the galaxy trembled. Humanity's silent return. The galaxy waited in terror. For weeks, the lost fleet moved through the rim without a word. Only silence, aliens sent fleets to confront them, only to watch those fleets vanish into wreckage. Colonies sent pleas for mercy, but no reply came to many. The fleet felt less like an army, and more like a force of nature, unstoppable and beyond reason. Then one night, every communication channel in the galaxy went silent. Screens flickered, frequencies collapsed. Every ship, every station, every world heard the same sound. An ancient human code. At first only static, then a voice. It was deep, calm, and cold. The words were few, yet they cut through the hearts of every living being. "We never vanished, we were watching." The message repeated once, then ended. The channels cleared. Silence returned. Across the galaxy, fear erupted. The council fell into chaos. Leaders argued. Soldiers refused to sleep. Even civilians whispered in terror. For the first time, the myths had spoken on Earth. Daniel stood in the embassy chamber as the message played. His hands tightened into fists. For centuries, humanity had been mocked. Their legends treated like stories for fools. Now the truth had revealed itself. He thought of the old words he had spoken to the council. Every legend carries a seed of truth. Now that seed had grown into a storm, but not all humans celebrated. Some felt pride, yes, but others felt dread. The fleet had returned, but it had not declared loyalty to Earth. It did not call itself the protector of humanity. Its message was not warm, it was cold. Watching could mean many things. To some it meant guardianship. To others it meant judgment. Alien leaders scrambled to prepare defenses. New weapons were tested. New fleets gathered. But inside their hearts they knew. If the mighty Veyron armada had been crushed, if the Yareth patrols had been erased, then their fleet stood no chance. Meanwhile, the fleet continued its march. Reports showed them moving closer to populated systems. Always in formation, always silent. They ignored hails, ignored offers of peace, ignored threats. They were not negotiating. They were not bargaining. They were returning. One colony world of the Drakkar Dominion caught sight of them. The sky filled with black shapes as enormous warships drifted above the atmosphere. No weapons fired. No destruction came. The fleet simply hovered, silent and endless. The world below trembled, waiting for fire, waiting for death instead. After hours of silence, the fleet turned and vanished back into the dark, leaving nothing but terror behind. Whispers spread. Some said the fleet was choosing targets carefully. Others claimed it was testing reactions. A few believed it was reminding the galaxy of its power, not through destruction but through silence. Silence was more frightening than war. A captured recording from a hidden probe showed one of the colossal ships in detail, its hull scarred and ancient, its surface etched with human markings faded by time. Across its side, 3 words were barely visible. United Earth Fleet. Aliens who saw the recording finally understood. These were not new ships, not tricks, they were truly ancient vessels. The very legends humans had spoken of for centuries. The fleet had survived in the void, waiting for a moment no one could explain. The council demanded answers. They dragged Daniel into the chamber once again. What do they want? One alien leader shouted, "Why have they returned?" Another cried. Daniel only shook his head. His voice was steady. "They do not answer to me. They do not answer to anyone. They return because they choose to. And when they choose to act, you will not laugh." That night, across alien worlds, the myths became something more. People no longer mocked humans, they feared them. The name of humanity spread like thunder through streets and markets. Soldiers whispered it as they checked their weapons. Leaders avoided saying it aloud, and in the dark void, the fleet continued its march one by one. Their engines lit up like faint stars, thousands of eyes opening at once, watching the galaxy, waiting. The message had been sent, the galaxy now knew.
Humanity had not vanished. Humanity had never been forgotten.
The lost fleet had returned. Wrath of the lost fleet. The galaxy had prayed the fleet would only watch. But silence was never meant to last. The first strike came without warning. On the outer colonies of the Veyron Empire, alarms sounded as the night sky lit up with fire. The colossal human warships emerged from the dark like shadows given shape. Their weapons spoke before their voices ever could. Rail projectiles tore through defense stations. Kinetic blasts shattered shields that had stood for centuries. Within minutes, entire garrisons fell. Not because they were weak, but because they were unprepared for a storm that came from legend. The Veyron fleet scrambled to respond. Hundreds of ships launched, their captains swearing vengeance. Yet the battle was over before it began. The lost fleet moved with cold precision. They did not waste shots, every volley struck its mark. Each alien ship reduced to drifting metal. Survivors whispered in terror, "They fight like machines." Not men, but the fleet was not soulless. It was human wrath carried across the stars. Word of the massacre spread. Other empires who once laughed at the myths began to tremble. The Yareth Dominion fortified their borders. The Drakkar hid their colonies in deep space, but the shadows could not be avoided. Wherever the fleet moved, fear moved faster. Daniel, standing in the Earth Embassy, watched the reports with heavy eyes. Some humans cheered, claiming justice had come at last. Those who mocked humanity were learning respect. But Daniel felt only dread. He whispered to himself, "This is not respect. This is vengeance." The council gathered again, their voices no longer mocking, no longer confident. "They do not answer our calls," one delegate cried. "They destroy without speaking," another shouted. "If they are human, why do they not come home?" No one had answers. In the colonies, stories grew darker. Witnesses said the fleet spared no warships, yet sometimes left civilian stations untouched. Entire cities sat frozen, waiting for doom, only to watch the fleet glide away into the void. This pattern puzzled many. Some claimed it was mercy. Others believed it was a warning. Then came the second strike. This time not against empires that had mocked humanity, but against slave fleets for centuries. The Drakkar Dominion had enslaved weaker species, chaining them to their war machines. When their armada entered the dark lanes of space, the lost fleet appeared. The battle lasted only minutes. Drakkar warships exploded like kindling. Their slaves, trapped aboard, were freed as the human ships cut chains and destroyed command vessels. Survivors told tales of massive human warships drifting silently past their escape pods, not firing, only watching for the first time. The slaves of the galaxy spoke one truth. The myths protect us. The galaxy was divided. Some feared the fleet as executioners. Others began to whisper of them as liberators. Yet none could deny their power. The myths were no longer shadows. They were judgment, alien leaders argued. They are punishing us for mocking humans, said one. No, said another. They are punishing cruelty itself. But deep down, all knew the same truth. The fleet followed no laws but its own. A hidden probe recorded a haunting scene in the aftermath of battle. The lost fleet stood in formation, hundreds of ships hovering above a shattered world. For hours they did not move. They broadcast no message, yet across the void, one transmission slipped through. A single phrase in ancient human code. Balance must be restored. The message echoed across every channel, repeating again and again. The galaxy shuddered for the first time. They realized the fleet was not only returning for vengeance, but to deliver something older, something deeper. Justice on Earth. Daniel lowered his head. He knew the myths better than most. He knew what others refused to see. The fleet had never been lost, it had been waiting, watching, learning, and now it was choosing targets not by accident, but by memory. Empires that mocked humans trembled, but empires that enslaved or oppressed trembled more, for the lost fleet was not blind. It carried the will of an older humanity, one that had suffered, one that had promised. The wrath of the lost fleet was no longer a rumor, it was a reality, and the galaxy braced for the storm still to come, and the galaxy held its breath. The myths made truth. The galaxy had reached a breaking point. No one laughed at human legends anymore. No one mocked the myths of the lost fleet, for the myths had become a living storm. A shadow stretched across the stars. Wherever the fleet appeared, silence and fear followed, and yet in some corners whispers of hope grew. Entire empires now watched the skies with dread. Some tried to negotiate, sending endless messages into the void, begging for talks, begging for peace. The fleet never answered. Others prepared for war, gathering every ship they could build. But deep in their hearts they knew their efforts were useless. For every battle fought ended the same way, with wreckage drifting in cold space on Earth. Daniel walked through the embassy halls in silence. He had warned the council. He had told them myths held seeds of truth. Now he watched as the seed had grown into something unstoppable. Some human leaders felt pride, speaking of the fleet as proof of humanity's greatness, but Daniel knew better. This is not greatness, he whispered to himself. This is judgment. The lost fleet did not move without reason. It struck at the proud. It struck at the cruel. It ignored the weak. It spared the innocent in this strange pattern. A message began to form. Humanity's fleet had not returned for conquest, nor for empire. It had returned for balance. In the Veyron sectors, slaves once chained to war machines now sang of freedom. They told stories of black ships cutting chains, of enemies destroyed in moments. They called the fleet the wrath of humanity. In other systems, however, entire empires trembled, wondering when their judgment would come. One night, the stars across half the galaxy lit up with a single broadcast. It was not static, not fragments, but a clear voice. It spoke in old human language, translated instantly by every system. We were mocked, we were forgotten, but we endured. The dark did not consume us. We are humanity's hand. We are the truth of the myth. And now we will watch until balance is restored. The galaxy froze. Every leader, every soldier, every civilian listened in silence. For centuries they had called these words stories for children. Now they heard them from the mouths of the very legends they mocked. Alien scholars tried to explain it. Some said the fleet had become more than human, shaped by the dark into something greater. Others argued it was still human at its core, returning to finish what had begun long ago. But the truth was beyond debate. The fleet was real, the myths were true. In the outer colonies, a group of alien children asked their teacher, Why did the humans never forget their stories? The teacher smiled sadly. Because stories are not just words. They are warnings, and now the warning has come alive. The Galactic Council collapsed under the weight of fear. Empires that had once ruled the stars found themselves humbled. No decree, no weapon, no alliance could silence the fleet. For the fleet did not seek their approval. It did not seek their permission. It did not seek their surrender. It only sought the truth of its own mission. Daniel stood once more before the council. This time there was no laughter. Only silence. Every alien eye watched him, waiting for answers, but Daniel only raised his head and said, "You asked if the myths were real. Now you see the myths are the truth, and the truth will never be mocked again." In the darkness beyond the rim, the lost fleet stood in endless formation, thousands of ships silent but alive. Their engines glowed faintly, like stars waiting to ignite. They did not move toward conquest nor toward peace, they simply watched. For the galaxy finally understood, the legends of humanity were not to be dismissed, not to be laughed at, for the myths had become truth. The truth had become power, and the power had returned. The myths once mocked now ruled the silence of space, and every world trembled in awe.